So Virgo is it's a pretty important sign. It is all signs in the zodiac are pretty important, but Virgo is a very key part of going from a stable home into becoming a stable home wherever you go, right? That's a very big thing for Virgo. I like these placements. We got a Virgo sun in the house with an earth moon and an air rising. A water, Scorpio, Aries, Capricorn. I like that. Those are pretty cool placements. I like your guys' placements. I like this. Christine is truly here as a supporter because even though she doesn't have Virgo in her big three, she's still here. I love that. I love seeing people participate even though it's not their turn. That really helps you learn astrology. Wow, that's a strong placement to have in the third house. Christine's gonna tell it like it is. Okay, so um, Virgo, it's the sixth sign in the zodiac. It is ruled by the planet Mercury. It is co-ruling that planet with Gemini. So shout out to anyone that does have Gemini in their big three because it's also like a twin. You know, I think of Gemini as the CPU and Virgo as the GPU because it's able to make everything work and actually present itself nicely and also assimilate high amounts of data that Gemini can just absorb like it's air. Moon and wow, that's a strong moon, especially in Vedic. It's a very strong big three. Rosa, I like that. Aries moon with the that's a grand fire trine, not one to mess with. So, Virgo season runs from August 23rd to September 23rd, and it's basically right after Leo season and right before Libra season. It's the, I'm gonna say, kind of the precursor to fall. It's like in between, we're leaving summer and it's like kids are going back to school, and then also like we're getting into official fall. Virgo's an earth element. It is very much about practicality, being grounded, being very focused on the material and the physical aspects of life, but really in how you can make it better. Got this little mug, and it goes over pretty much some of the daily values of Virgo when it comes to its perfectionist, resourcefulness, hardworking personality, and also the ruling planet, like I said, Mercury, is all about your intellect, but not just communication, because that's something that gets stated. It is that too, but it's the way that you choose to communicate. That's a really big part. If you look at where you have Mercury, it's a little fun fact, and you look at the house, you can see how you like to position yourself in conversation, how you like to absorb information, and the house will delegate where that information is your superpower, you know? We'll obviously be talking more on that just in case you know a little bit of astrology already. So, Virgo, the symbol is the maiden. It is a feminine sign, but Virgo is seen as pure, it's wise, and it has a strong sense of service. Now, Virgo is the sister sign of Pisces. They're both feminine. The maiden is how I see Virgo, and I think of the of Pisces as the martyr. It could be like the high priestess. It could be Jesus. It could be the clerically high status nun in a cistercian. Like all of that. It's a difference of power. I think when I look at it, right? So, with that, let's move on to the next part. I actually did not ask share my big three. So I'm a Sun Scorpio, Moon in Virgo, and a Taurus rising myself. Now, the positive traits of Virgo is basically being very sharp. It is very much um, taking in large sums of information, like I say, and digesting it to be simple. I learned that a lot about myself, and I think anyone else here who has Virgo or Mercurial placements. Let me turn on this light because it's getting dark outside. We are really good at like finding inefficiencies in things and this is really good analytically because I think that Virgos innately have a very good pattern recognition. I learned a lot about it in school. Um, I learned a lot about it after leaving school. I went to school for biochemistry and I noticed that I just saw the patterns. I see the way that things underline. And I think I've taken that to my other careers and then also astrology because I use astrology primarily before getting into it spiritually as a pattern recognition tool. When someone told me I was a Scorpio and I'm toxic, I was like, what makes that a thing? Right? And so looking at, the pros and cons of each sign and seeing what people stereotypically say, and then overlaying that with data, as a Virgo would love to say, or not, is like amazing. Now, it can also become very crucial, right? It can also be like, oh, you're not this, this, and this, so you're not perfect. You're not the best, and I'm gonna nitpick you forever. In the astrology podcast, a really good YouTube channel that I would recommend. I've watched them all, but I remember on the Virgo podcast, they talked about Virgo, and this lady had said something that I always stick to. And she said that Virgo is like a craftsman that doesn't know when to stop. Like the whittler, I think it's called, where you create little cool objects with wood, and it's like you whittle it away, and you're like, not perfect. Let me whittle some more, not perfect, until you have nothing left, right? That's the overly critical action of Virgo that can really take that object and make it a person, right? Make it a situation, an environment, and a thing. And it can be very toxic to people, especially because Virgos are the king of unsolicited advice, the queen or king of unsolicited advice. So it's like you walk by a Virgo, they like you, you're gonna know because they're probably gonna annoy you. um, but we'll get into that later. So, hardworking, right? Dedicated, diligent, always striving for perfection and excellence in their work. This is a really common trait for all of the earth signs, actually. Taurus just does it for themselves. Nothing wrong with Taurus, but they make sure that when they go somewhere, they put in their best foot forward for that scenario. And then Virgo does it for others, and Capricorn does it as a mixture. But it's almost like the triplicity, meaning that when it comes to the earth signs, having every sign actually, every sign has the triplicity, meaning like the triangle, right? Where Taurus is the first, Virgo is the second, and then Capricorn being the third. We go in this cycle of maturity, and the first and the second and the third, right? And I talk about this a lot. And I'm going to keep talking about it just so it really gets in your guys' head. But the first of the element is the infant, right? The second is the adult, and the third, or teenager, and the third would be the adult or the elder. And so the second, typically, when it comes to talking about the elements or the decant or what quadrant it's in, it's going to be interpersonal relationships with others, one on one, not on the masses, right? Taurus is just about itself. It can work with people or it can work alone. The Virgo is what it does with others. It needs to be around other people. It it wants to perfect things and get them better. It always acquires knowledge, but it wants to share. And so Virgo typically ends up being very good teachers, and also something that people might know Virgos for. They're really good with children because children are what? Annoying. No, teachable. Children are teachable. You can genuinely teach children. They'll listen to you, especially because you're older. And Virgos really take advantage of that because, like I'm doing right now, not that you guys are children, but I teach people like they're kids. I've learned that. I've been a teacher for a lot of things. I've taught people how to trade in the financial markets. I taught people organic chemistry, biochemistry, and so many other things, but it's like the perception of I'm giving you this gift. And so Virgos are really good at that. Now, once again, the perfectionist can come into play where it's like you want so good for your children that you don't let them experience life and you take away aspects of them being able to really make mistakes, right? Really like um, get to explore what it is to be a student, right? And it can become a little bit of a dictatorship, right? Because the Virgo, the maiden, in some ways, kind of like the aunt or maybe kind of mom, wants you to not make mistakes. So by not wanting you to make mistakes, they don't let you experience life because if you do that, that's silly. That's going to waste your time. That's a really big word I want to highlight, right? Before I get into a tangent, I do want to just make sure that everyone's following me. If you guys have any questions, feel free to answer now or ask questions now. If you don't, of course, I'll still keep going, but you can also drop questions or anything like that in the chat. So, as I was saying, Mercury, which is the planet that rules Virgo and Gemini, is all about distance. It's all about communication through distance, but most importantly, time. Right now, we're in a Mercury retrograde, and we know that. But it's really just about how fast Mercury's moving around Earth and how close it is. And so Gemini can yap, it can really talk. But that's because their brain, like I said, their CPU is so advanced, they can just keep going and going and going and going. They can listen to you and talk. And I say this all the time. Whenever I see Gemini in water, I'm like, go be a therapist. Someone needs you in their life. Go be a therapist, right? But for Virgo, it takes in that information and it makes it better. It nitpicks the information that it has. Now, with that, we get the con as well of being too overthinking, right? Because Gemini will just talk and they'll get anxious, but Virgo will keep it in. They'll go quiet. If you see a Virgo go quiet, they're probably either criticizing you or they're having an anxiety attack. So definitely something to consider whenever you see that happen. But it's still an amazing thing once a Virgo can accept themselves and to just sit and say, you know, life is what it is. I might be able to see the underpinnings of everything, but I don't need to do everything about it. I don't need to in unexplicitly put myself into a situation that no one asked me to do, stress myself, give myself so much of a workload, and then have an anxiety attack or a nervous breakdown. You know, that's pretty Virgo. But let's move on. So, as I talked about Mercury, it is the smallest planet with the fastest orbit right after the moon. And it is about how we like to communicate, how we facilitate our ideas in any sort of medium, whether it's writing, typing. Uh, I want to kind of give Neptune the video because it's media consumption through your own delusion. So I'm not going to say that specifically. But as we know, it rules Gemini and Virgo. Um, it is short distance travel. The opposite of Gemini is Sagittarius, and that's long distance travel. But it's really about the little everyday things, right? Versus the overall long distance like routines of things that are more Virgo based versus Gemini, right? The technology that's associated with uh, Gemini or Mercury as a planet in general usually gives us new mediums of communication. We have Mercury moving, we have, sorry, Mercury. We have Uranus moving into Gemini in 2026, later 2025 a little bit. And it's most likely going to bring us a new technological advancement. Because every time that Uranus, the planet, has been in the sign of Gemini, that element or energy of Mercury always gives us something new, and that has been a new way of writing. A It's called curiform. The Silk Road, the transistor that gave us computers. Every single time the transit happens, we get something new. So it's going to be really interesting to see if we're going to have like cyborg chip implants or whatever it is that we're going to be doing in the future. I don't know, but that's something to definitely expect. So some more. Mercury is a duality of a planet. It does have the ability to be two things at once, and that's why Mercury is typically like I look at it as androgynous, where it's like it's two things. It can play two roles. It knows how to shape shift The energy of Mercury is really good as politician. Gemini specifically are really good politicians because they know how to work the crowd. They know how to be that for both sides, right? They know what to say, when to say it, in the moment to say it, right? And then also, something most people don't know is that Mercury does rule with exchanges and trades, but it's just because the idea of the Silk Road, like you would think about, is that Hermes, the associated mythology to Mercury, is a messenger for the gods, and Hermes had to shapeshift in many instances on that trail to go from city to city to deliver messages. Hermes would transform into a woman or a man, and that's why it's seen as androgynous. And I typically notice when I do read for a lot of mercurial placements, especially Gemini, they tend to be able to be both, especially Gemini risings. They tend to be able to be both. And I think that there's an element of Mercury that influences the Gemini mind where it's like there's no well, this is going to get political, but that's not what I'm trying to get to. But just keeping it straight, astrologically speaking, and in the idea of masculine and feminine with astrology, the duality of black and white, polarity, Mercury has both. And so, like, Sun and Moon is masculine, feminine. Venus and Mars, masculine, feminine. Jupiter, Saturn, masculine and feminine. But Mercury gets both. So that's why it's able to be both. And I think that's a really important thing because going into communicating and being able to be both things is what makes these mercurial heavy people great comedians, great talk show hosts, really good people to just speak, right? That's where they get the little politician edge there as well. And of course, early learning. This is a cool trick. If you have kids or you have nieces, nephews, find their Mercury, if it's water, fire, air, earth, or air, and that environment that they will like to learn is something that's like a cheat code. So I'll give an example. A Leo Mercury versus a Scorpio Mercury. A Leo Mercury is going to want to be around its siblings, being shown that it knows the most. It wants to be able to show itself to be the best, right? A Scorpio Mercury would prefer you talk to them one on one away from everyone else. And so if you have kids, you can kind of see their interactions and also put that together yourself as their parent and really be able to communicate them really well like this. Same thing with a partner, right? Obviously, don't manipulate people with this information, but if you have a partner that has a square with your Mercury as an aspect or a trine, these are things to keep in mind. However, the element is a really big thing. If you're a water Mercury and you have an air Mercury partner, you have to have patience for that person to realize sometimes the conversation isn't going to be as deep as you want it to be and as emotional as you want it to get, but they'll still entertain it. And it's not because they wouldn't go into it as the depth that you want, but sometimes it could just be a light conversation. And it's vice versa for them to understand sometimes they do need to go deeper for you. Fire versus earth. Sometimes it's gonna be chaos. That fire is definitely like, let's have some fun, right? Like let's really light it up. And then earth is more like, let's calm down. Let's just chill and then we can talk about it, right? There's an energy transformation. So really, if you have the ability to, look up some children around you that you know you have time to be around them and see how their Mercury is and see if you can really apply that yourself. Once again, I'm just going to offer, in case you guys have any questions, feel free to stop me. I know I can talk a lot, but I just don't want to lose anyone if it's your first time or not. If you're familiar with astrology or not, I have no problem repeating myself or answering questions for everyone. So, what is a Mercury retrograde? I'm sure we've been hearing all about it. Mercury is in microwave, Gatorade, whatever aid. So astrologically, the planet of communication is traveling around in an elliptical orb, right? It's not a perfect circle. when it goes retrograde, it's just getting really close to Earth because Mercury doesn't actually retrograde like the other planets. And so it's the proximity of Mercury to Earth that is causing it to be like, this is like ballistic, right? And I like to tell people, think about like, imagine you are next to a let's say you unfortunately live next to a fire station and a preschool. And for whatever reason, one day your house fire alarm goes off, and the preschool, because they're in proximity to your home, also has like a fire alarm. So all the kids are rushing outside. The the firefighters in the actual fire station next to you are running into your home, and it's like there's a fire, there's not a fire, then there are kids outside just playing around having a whole bunch of fun, and then it's like there's so much going on, we can't even just get to the conclusion that hey, there's no fire, we don't know why it went off. There are kids that are having the time of their life outside, and we need to get them back inside the school to settle down, and they just don't want to. And so this is like a really big conglomeration of energy, and that's the biggest thing about the retrograde. It's not that it disrupts everything, but it's because we cannot sit down and rationalize this intellectually, right? And ironically, I like to look at Mercury retrogrades as like a water type of interaction with fire, because it's like it creates steam, which would be air and Mercury. But it's like the water is, there's so much emotional turbulence between people, and the fire is, the chaos is just so ripe that it's like that's the steam, right? And so traveling, having technological issues, communication issues, if you think about it, a lot of the times it comes down to patience. And I said this earlier this week during tarot, where it's like, if you can have patience and really sit back emotionally and be like, I'm not going to let this bother me, most of these Mercury retrogrades won't affect you. Because as things happen, you'll be able to be like, hmm, am I really going to let this grind my gears? No. So then it just won't. You'll be able to solve it when you can. You'll be able to work through it, and you'll be able to process it. But if you can't do that, your emotional dysregulation and the chaos of it will create the retrograde for you. Now, something I like to do as well, and I did this week, is I love healing during the retrogrades. Oh, go ahead, Rosa. You have a question. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Bother you. Yeah, yeah. No, for sure. And that's like that's the key thing, because if you think about it, right? And I'm going to use Virgo here because that's what we're talking about. For me, when I look at people, I also have a, like Scorpio. So like when I look at people, when I look at their actions, I really think about it from a behavioral perspective. When someone hurts me, I look at it and I say, is it truly hurting me, or is it a projection based upon some traumatic experience that they have? Are they being triggered right now? Is it something that happened to them outside of me and they're resonating it to me? How is it that in this moment I can handle this to respect myself, but also give them space to probably analyze and reflect their own emotional capacity in this moment and be like, wait, you didn't lash out at me. Huh. I actually said something really rude to you. Or even if they don't do that, it just brushes off me and they'll move on to somewhere else and someone else. But like, just think of how what you were saying with communication not working and people driving around very crazy. If you just talk to yourself in those moments, as long as you're not physically like, if someone's like driving towards you, and I would definitely, but like if you're not in immediate danger, a lot of the times don't just laugh in people's face, but it is pretty funny because you're like, I don't, for me, I look at it and I'm like, whenever Mercury's in retrograde, I'm like, everyone's a headless chicken and I'm a farmer. And I'm just gonna have to be here with the sheep or the headless chicken and be like, they're there. It's gonna be okay. Right? And a lot of people will come to me from my readings and check in, and I allow them to do that just because I understand that like to be emotionally healthy, to be a spiritual person or to be someone that practices these divination tools, we get to see it. That's the cool part of astrology. It's not to put fear. We get to see what's coming. And so like a Mercury retrograde will show you when to take a break, right? And this is where I want to go into the reflective period as well. I do healing. This week I did a lot of healing. I let go of a lot of past traumas, a lot of people in my life, because while everyone else is crazy, I get to sit back and truly ground because nothing's really going to be able to be fully rectified when no one's going to be able to come to agreements. So I love to go and try to mend things that have gone wrong. And that will heal a lot more when everyone else is crazy and you're the sole person that's coming out and trying to seek a peaceful environment with someone. It really, really does wonders, right? And it happens 3 to 4 times a year, right? And about 3 times there is a shadow period where it's starting to ingress. You have your first pass into the sign. As it goes retrograde, it moves back. We're probably going to leave to go to the previous sign, and then we're going to move forward. Like right now, Mercury was retrograde in Virgo, and it's moved back into Leo, and it's going to be there about till the end of this month. I can actually pull that out here just so you guys can see it. Let's get Mercury right here, and it's retrograded in Leo, and the RX is standing for retrograde. It's at 28 degrees. You guys are able to see my screen, correct? Okay, awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. All right. So I talked about this. One of the major things besides emotionally regulating is if you are signing contracts, double check, triple check, quadruple check. If anything, don't start something during a retrograde. Not because the thing you start itself is the issue, but sometimes the wrong wording was not seen because everyone else is doing things way too quickly and things get missed, right? Um, Now, when we consider, oh, what's up, Rosa? Hmm. 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 Of course, of course. Yeah, like I said, I don't want to put fear into it. I do like to, sometimes there is a fear that comes with things, and sometimes the reality is like a transit where you have Pluto or something happening. Like, that's what it is, right? Like, I can't not say that. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. But when it does come down to it, having a surgery during a retrograde might not be a good idea. Not because Mercury being so close to Earth is going to make you suddenly get impaled during surgery, but it's because the rush and the emotional turbulence of maybe the RN or whatever, something doesn't get double checked, and then you got the wrong part of your body getting operated on. That's how it happens. And so, if you are meticulous enough, you can still launch something during the retrograde, but it's like you're probably better off waiting, right? Now, if you have a retrograde in your chart, or it's specifically Mercury that's retrograded in your chart, every single planet in your chart has aspects, and so it will definitely be affected by that. But when someone has that during this point in time, they actually don't really have like any issues because when you have the retrograde, a retrograde in every planet is a remembrance of something. It is a going back to that situation. When it's with Mercury, it's about overthinking about the situations and having a lack of patience because if you're not addressing something during a retrograde in the past, if you didn't address something in the past, sorry, during a retrograde, it comes back up. And so it becomes this thing that can give you anxiety and emotional turbulence. But if you have it natally, then you're like, oh yeah, I'm always thriving in chaos. What are you guys talking about? Like I always have this going on. And so I always remember what this feels like, and I don't need to worry about it too much, right? But like I said, use it as much as you can to grow yourself. And so that way you can definitely continue to be a better person. I personally have noticed, oh, Jay, you have a Mercury retrograde. Okay, that's interesting. Um, you should definitely share what sign if you want. I have noticed when I've read charts that people with Mercury retrogrades or retrogrades in any planet are very sensitive in that planet's energy. And especially in Mercury, they're actually, and I don't want to just blanket statement this because every aspect and whatever, but in most charts I see people with the retrograded Mercury don't express as much, so they're so environmentally aware that they come off to me smarter when you get them in the one-on-one. When they're retrograde in that sense, like let's say it's a Leo Mercury, or I'll just use your Libra Mercury. This is like usually a Libra Mercury is going to overtalk. It's going to yap. It's going to share way more than it needs to, and it's going to try and interject itself everywhere that it doesn't need to be. However, when it's retrograded, now it's just really good at seeing balances of power between people and being able to see like that's an issue, that's an issue, that's an issue, and then not saying anything about it. Like quite literally keeping it to itself. It's almost as if it becomes a Scorpio placement, like a normal Scorpio placement. And it's also very, very good at knowing when to say things and also when not to, and actually not saying things more than it needs to. It's very, very good at that. But so we have arrived to the housing system. Before I continue, I just want to pause here. I've been yapping for about 30 minutes. I like to take a break, give you guys about 5 minutes. It is 7:35. We can come back around 7:40-ish. I'll pause the recording, and then I'll be able to continue and of course answer questions, and then you guys will be on your way. How does that sound? All right, so I'm gonna pause everything and we'll, okay, cool. So we're back. Let's talk about the housing system. So everyone with your charts, pull them up. Give you a little bit to pull them up. Your chart is not gonna look directly like mine, but if I pull this right here, this is the chart wheel, and you'll be able to actually see more than just this actually. Let me pull up the main ones that matter, or let me actually pull up more than that so we can kind of twin and actually share. Mine has a little bit more than yours, but it's roughly like this, right? And so we're going to be looking at the house where you have Virgo, and then we're also going to be looking at the placement of Virgo itself. And right now, this chart is called a transit chart. And if you don't know what that is, that's basically showing where the planets are in this current moment. Like right now, as we are existing, this is where the planets are. So you can see the sun is in Leo because we're still in Leo season, because Virgo season doesn't start for another 7 days. Don't forget that. And moon is Capricorn and the rising is also Capricorn. The only Virgo placement we have here is Venus. Venus is in Virgo, and we're going to be talking about that because Venus and Virgo, it can kind of not get along, but we'll see. Uh, and then Mercury itself, let's look for Mercury, is in Leo and it's retrograded, right? So those are two important things that we got going on right now. I do have some videos about the current transits if you guys want to watch them on my YouTube channel, which is also connected on my site. But let's go back to this teaching lesson. So if you are able to find yours, Jenica, if you don't know yours, but you do know your birth time, I'm actually going to drop that in the chat, and you'll be able to type in your birth info and actually look up your chart so you can have this like we do. But let's say you have an Aries rising Aries rising meaning that the first house, and this is why I use whole sign for people to keep it very simple, the location of where you're born and the location of the equator affects the spring equinox, but it also affects where your first house in your chart is. So what tends to happen is this might not be directly here. And so using the whole sign system really helps you with that, and it keeps things very simple for beginners. Um, but this is Aries. Aries is the first house. Virgo is in the sixth house. Now, I like to tell people this to keep it very simple. The house is an opera, it's a stage of performance. The energy of the house itself and the sign that's in the house will placate and it will show an energy. And the house, every single house has its own energy, right? Meaning, Virgo would love to be in the sixth house because that's where it typically rules. If it's another sign, then the energy of that house is being taken over by Virgo. But we still consider the original owner of the home. It's like Virgo's renting in this house, but it's just there, right? And in this example, if you have a Scorpio rising, then Virgo is renting the 11th house, meaning that it's there for a little bit. And the energy of having Virgo in the 11th house is very much about learning how to be efficient, how to be reliable, hardworking, how to be a resourceful person for people. Why people? Because the 11th house is typically ruled by Aquarius. And Aquarius is all about community and people. So Virgo comes in and says, okay, I'm going to have this massive network of people where I get to bring value by being efficient, knowing how to connect people one another. All the Virgo things in the home of where Aquarius typically likes to be. So, Virgo rising in the first house, that's a big one because that basically means that, well, you're pinnacle Virgo. Actually, like Virgo rising, that's like literally the sign. I love to tell people that if you have signs if you have placements in your first house, you're really just that sign. And the more you have, the merrier it is. So let's take a look at some of the charts you guys have shared with me, actually. So Ren, Virgo rising. Although I will say you do have quite a bit more placements in your other houses, so I think that's really important. I really wouldn't consider you that much of the Virgo energy. However, in case you don't know, the rising sign is your chart's main energy. So if you have a Virgo rising, you're ruled by Mercury. If you have a Libra rising, you're ruled by Venus, right? That's something I'm going to cover in my advanced class that I'm going to be doing, but it's just something to know. You can definitely look it up yourself. It's not like I'm gatekeeping, but J, you have a Pisces rising, so you're a jovial rising, meaning you're ruled by Jupiter. That's a really nice one. Um, and Jeff, you're a Scorpio rising yourself with wow, that is a very strong placement to have. That's very, very spiritually inclined. Nice. So you are, I'm going to say Plutonic, but you're ruled by Pluto. Awesome. So let's go ahead and actually talk about the sixth house because that's very important. And I really want to respect your guys' time so we don't go too far out. So it's all about work and service. The sixth house, whatever planets you have in there, and the sign are going to indicate very accurately, I actually think, especially if you have a rising sign, what it is that you like to do about your day to day, right? The career and ambitions are your 10th house, but your everyday is your sixth house. So what does that mean? Okay, I'm gonna use let's see here. I'll use UJ because yours is um, relatively simple, and I'd put that. So you would have Leo as your sixth house. Okay, so that's really about making sure other people are taken care of. It's actually knowing how to bring about the best thing. But let's say I use Leo, right, in the sixth house, or I use any fire sign really in the sixth house. The element of fire in your sixth house, especially if you have planets there, oh my gosh, life has to be a thing every day. When you wake up and you do it, you can't just work a job. Some people, if you had Earth in your sixth house, you could just work any job. With fire there, it's got to be something that truly brings you purpose, right? Because a Leo, especially in the sixth house, wants to make sure it gets things done, right? Especially like here, I'll use yours as well. Look at that. So sixth house for Jeff is Aries. That is definitely going into it. I would highly advocate that you try some martial arts, actually, or definitely try to get good amounts of workouts in. But it doesn't just have to be a physical thing because it's Aries. But it's like it has to be this thing that's militant, right? Because like I said, if Virgo rules the sixth house and it wants to come in and it wants to be something that is everyday, optimizing for success, efficiency, it wants to come in and help and it's day to day, adding Aries or fire now becomes militant. We got to get up at 5. We got to do this at 10. We got to do this at 12. No ifs, ands, or buts. We're doing this every single day. We are going at it to the wall and it's going to be full scale, right? That's the fire. Compared to water or air, air six housers, I feel sorry for them sometimes. Not because they don't have a career, but it's like you guys have the most difficult thing, which is like your jobs are usually nothing to what people would assume you to be, especially Aquarius. And it's just like everyone can just be a 9 to 5, but for air people, they just can't. It's like I'm not built for this, right? I'm built to frolic in a field or something, and so they end up doing, very interesting jobs where they become instructors, like yoga instructors, Pilates instructors, or they'll be working in careers completely different from what they graduated from. Another thing would be business owners typically will have air signs because the CEO mentality means they have to think so much differently, right? Um, Another thing is the physical health itself, right? Nutrition, exercise, and well being. Although I don't cover this, I know a few astrologers and one that I teach on their platform. Her name is Deborah, and she has a website, and it is, uh, oh, that's so horrible of me not to remember, but I want to really mention it because she is the expert at uh, just quite literally everything health astrology related, right? Her name is Deborah and she has Neo Astrology. That's what it is called. And I'm going to get her website and all of that to share before we do leave because I really want to shout her out as she is amazing at what she does. But with her page and everything that she does actually go through, it's really really cool to see how the sixth house gets used for health. I've had the meals that I can and cannot eat done by someone who really is. I'm not giving medical advice, but they were a medical doctor and they also did astrology. And so they literally used the sixth house to show me meals that I needed to eat because as a Virgo, our tummies are not friends with us. And so I was getting bad stomach pains and they were able to curate a diet for me of things that don't work with my chart. And to this day, I still eat that same way, and I don't have any more stomach issues that a typical Virgo gets told that they have, right? And this now comes to the thing. That lady had a lot of Virgo. And I tend to notice that heavy Virgo or heavy sixth house and the element will give an act of service of what it wants to be, right? And with this, I really want to stress that Virgos are really good if they can go in somewhere and not be seen and make it better. Because Virgo is right after Leo and before Libra, Virgo's not really too keen on getting like all the shiny medals and thank you and this, that, and the third. They just want to make sure it's getting done. Versus Leo, which does want the attention for the hard work it does put in. And Libra, which is like, I just want everyone to get along. Virgo's right in the middle. And I say this all the time when you have the chart to really look at the sign and look at the signs between it, and you really get a nice blend of what it is, right? So next time that you see someone that you know that might have Virgo do something, you don't need to go and shout to everyone that they did it. Just tell them personally. That does so much more for a Virgo than a plaque. It's the small consideration that they appreciate because Virgo is right before the descendant. And the descendant, or Libra, which is in the seventh house, is all about interpersonal relationships. And a Virgo wants to be considered, but not overly flashy like Leo. And so, with this, the last thing I kind of want to mention of the sixth house is, although I don't do this, I do know some astrologers that are good at this, but your relationships with pets is also something that can be considered in the sixth house. And also the type of pet you might be into, cat versus dog, right? The type of interaction you want to have with that animal, but also all animals. The way that you would go about dealing with nature is ironically something that you'll find in the sixth house when you look at your element that you have in there and the sign. So I put a brief overview of some interesting facts about your identity. If you have the sun there, the moon, the Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. But it really does boil down to, especially with the houses, the house of where it's in. You take a basic chart as if it has an Aries rising, and you say, if I have the sun in the sixth house, I'm probably going to be a workaholic, right? If I have Mars in the sixth house, I'm definitely a workaholic. Like I need to compete at work. If I have Jupiter there, I'm barely working and I'm getting all the admiration for all of it, right? If I have Saturn there, I'm working because I'm just gonna have to work. And it doesn't have to be that sad, but it's like you're working towards something very big, right? Having Neptune, for instance, is like I want to be able to work, but I also don't want to, right? You said you have Neptune, Uranus, and that's a lot to have in there. That's very much making it so that you want to stick out in your work. When you have those three generational planets, Uranus, Neptune, and well, Pluto, but you have Saturn, that creates this bind of that element where it's like, this is something where I'm going to do it. I have a vision, but it's going to take time. And I really know that I really know that I'm going to get there, but it's not going to be like my peers, right? That is a summary of Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune being so close to that because it's got to be different. That's Uranus. It's going to be something I envision. That's Neptune, but it's going to take time, and that's Saturn. All right. So before I continue, because we're almost done, before I ask questions and have you guys participate after I stop the recording, I wanted to make sure you guys could ask me any questions in case I flew by too quickly for that. If you have questions, otherwise, I'll go on to the planetary dignities. Okay. I hope you guys are able to keep up and I'm not like going too quickly. All right. So, planetary dignities. What is this? So, these are basically the planets that a sign wants to be in and how it works with that energy, right? So, let's go with a domicile. A domicile is a planet and where the sign is home. It's like, I love being here, I'm staying here, and I'm not leaving, right? An example of this is like is domicile in Cancer because the moon, being the feminine, being darkness, wants to be in Cancer, which is also the feminine. It's also the night. It is the crab. It has a tough exterior like a home, but a very soft and interior like a home, right? In just that same way, the moon wants to be behind the sun. It wants to be unseen, behind the veil, if we're talking esoteric or occultic language. Now, the opposite of a domicile is a detriment, meaning that the planet cannot freely express the energy that it wants to be here, and it's seen as a challenge, right? Now, I do want to say, when you learn astrology, you first learn good and bad. Then you learn, okay, good and a little bad. And then you learn, okay, it's really how you take it. And then you learn it's all good or it's all bad. And then finally you get to, it is whatever I make it, right? If you can truly understand astrology to a point where you accept everything you have and others, you just pretty much become like what would be assumed of people that are religious, where you treat everyone with respect because you understand their differences. This is a tool of divination. It's not the end all be all. And just as if I was playing with runes or I was playing with tarot cards, at the end of the day, I have things that I'm good at or that I struggle with, and my goal as a human being in this reincarnation or whatever you want to call it, I'm just working towards being better every single day, right? I'm sure any motivational speaker could do a better job than me at that. But that's what it boils down to when you take astrology and you try to actually act it out alchemically, right? The whole process of going through alchemy is just being a better person every day, which is the same thing that most religions teach you, which is the same thing you're taught in school. Treat others as you would like to be treated. Be a good person. So, with that, I wanted to put that as a disclaimer for the detriment, right? So, Saturn doesn't want to be in the sign of Cancer, right? Saturn wants to be emotionless. It wants to kind of go through things with a very logical and a very straightforward way. And Cancer is all emotional. It doesn't want to be there. So a detriment is going to be something that's very difficult for the planet to exert its energy, right? An exaltation is like, hey, everyone's happy. Everything is perfect. It's better than the home because it's like if the home had like a three-story living situation with a pool, a movie theater, a gym, and free food forever, right? That's like the exaltation. It's not just the home. It's literally, I'd never leave. I'd never leave. That sounds like heaven as a Taurus rising. But Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. Now think about that, right? I like to tell people that astrology, you can do some math. And if you hate math, it's not numbers, but it's like a derivative of like Jupiter exalted in Cancer means that Jupiter, the planet that is abundant, it's like Santa Claus, it wants to give, is in the sign of love, nurturing, the moon's energy, which is like remembering things, being there, being kind. Jupiter in Cancer is living literally just so much giving. It's like the original Pisces. It's just I want to give you agape love as if you were Jesus or someone's mom or like just completely giving it to people, right? Now, a fall is where it's not as much of a challenge as a detriment, but it's also like, hey, I kind of don't want to be here either, right? And a good example of that is Mars in Cancer. Mars being in Cancer is like, they're really good athletes, right? And I say that because once that anger starts going, it's pretty much domestic violence. Like, you can't really control that anger because Mars is so much energy and Cancer is so emotionally charged that when it comes together, it's like I just lost myself in the moment. I'm so sorry, but it's like that's kind of crazy, you know? Just because you have a Mars in Cancer doesn't mean that like you're a bad person or whatever, but it's just like it's gonna be tough to hold it back, right? So when we go into Virgo and we talk about where Virgo itself has these planetary dignities, right? We find out that it's domiciled in Mercury. This is something that people argue about left and right. I personally just look at both of them to be good. Gemini and Virgo, to me, they are a domicile to Mercury. That's just the way I see it. I think about it and I say that they're all communication, and one just does one differently. I'm personally not going to sit and read 17 books, look up 18 articles, and write three different peer reviewed essays that I don't even post just because I was bored. That's Gemini. As a Virgo, I'll read little excerpts and skim through it and get a just idea, and then I'll find a way to put it all together and cite it. That's Virgo, right? So Virgo wants to be a Mercury. It does well there. Instead of just having so much information overload, in Mercury, Virgo is like a librarian. It is a good assistant. It is a very, very good speaker because it remembers. Remember that pattern recognition. It sees things, right? And since Mercury is all about the way we produce and communicate, it's like worked hand in hand, right? Now, this is where it kind of gets rough, right? And just stay with me. This is our last slide, I believe. When we talk about detriments, right? And just think, Jupiter is the detriment in Virgo. Why is that? Well, Jupiter is all about abundance and faith and hope and giving. It's optimism, right? Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Pisces, right? Now, if we just think about that alone, Virgo is the opposite of Pisces. So if Jupiter rules Pisces, then the opposite of Pisces is not going to be good, right? Because it's like good and bad, black and white, masculine and feminine, pro and con, whatever, duality, right? As above, so below. But Virgo is a scientist. Virgo is detail oriented. Virgo lacks faith. And I hate to say that as a Virgo moon, but it's true. We lack a lot of faith. We see the glass half empty. And until you prove me wrong, we're just not going to believe. Because Virgo needs receipts, it needs data. And data doesn't operate on faith. And so Virgo has a very hard time seeing the visionary ideas of Jupiter. Does that mean if you have Jupiter in Virgo, you're a detriment? No, because you might just have that and then so much other energies in your chart that it's perfect. And that's why I like to say, don't take this as end all be all, but it's a teachable thing so you know maybe a person with a Jupiter in Virgo has a lot of crippling anxiety, and it's because they're not able to rationalize that energy in their chart. But you could show them that, right? And that's how we go about this. Jupiter in Virgo fights with faith. Jupiter in Sagittarius or Pisces, they're the luckiest people. They get stuff for free. They're going everywhere. They're having a good time because their mind, their subconscious is already geared towards, I'm going to go. I don't know how I'm going to pay for it, but it's going to be paid. And I'm going to be the Lulu. That is literally the way I would say Jupiterian energy is. So, having a Jupiterian rising, having a jovial rising and the rest of your chart harmonizes with that energy, it's a good time all around. You might not even be watching this right now because you're like, you never have to worry about most things. And all this benefic energy might not make you question a lot of things in life. You see what I'm saying? So Jupiter in Virgo wants to know every little detail. And that's hard when you try to have faith because faith comes from emotion to assume the thing that you don't see, walking by faith and not by sight, not Christian, but I do see the Bible to be a really good alchemic and mystical encryption. And it's like that is how you have faith. That is the essence of Jupiter. It's a dominion. I don't need to go for the little things because I know I have a big pot of gold. Virgo is like, I need to do the little things. I need to collect the little resources and I need to make sure I have every little knickknack and what I got, right? Gemini is like, I just want things. Virgo's like, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this, right? If you really want to go camping, go with a Virgo. Nothing's going to get forgotten. If you want to have a really good time, go with a Sag. You're not going to have everything you need, but you will have stories for a lifetime. I can guarantee you that. And if you have both, well, you're probably crazy. But going into the exaltation, once again, it's Virgo. Now, I do have a difference of opinion. I think the exaltation of Mercury is actually Aquarius. People will fight you for it, but I think Virgo and Aquarius are heavy considerations. And the biggest reason for that is Gemini is not going to be able to sit still enough, I think, long term for it to execute on some things, but it's a really good thinker. And it's like, if your home has a Gemini, a Virgo, and like any fire sign, it's going to be fun. It's going to be so fun because if you can harness the energy of the Yapper, which would be the Gemini, and then have the Virgo being able to take little bits and pieces, the fire sign's going to come in and like just actually execute things. It's not just going to be a giant whiteboard everywhere and a bunch of post-it stickers and things half done. It's going to actually be things. Otherwise, they're going to tear each other to pieces because that dynamic can be pretty vengeful. But Virgo wants to be in Mercury because, like I said, the librarian never forgets. It knows exactly what row on what shelf on what floor to go get that one single book. That's the mind of a Virgo Mercury. It never forgets the right thing, which, right? A lot of Virgo Mercuries are lyricists, right? A lot of Gemini stallion people will be good at speaking, but the lyricism will come from Virgo mercurial energy. With that being said, never argue with the Virgo Mercury. You will lose. They will remember things that you don't even remember about yourself. So, last but not least, Venus in Virgo. It is fall here. Now, why is that? Venus is the sign of values and love and also money. Venus wants to be in Libra. Venus is exalted in Pisces. Why is that? Because it's agape love. Quite literally, it's loving a person to such a delusional level that even though that person really has done nothing for you, you're like, I love them. I need them, right? The opposite of that is actually logic and rationale, and that's Venus in Virgo. So, what happens when Venus, the sign of love, harmony, and beauty, is in Virgo? It's critical. It's very nitpicky. And I tend to notice that Venus and Virgo end up really attacking themselves, right? They end up being underweight. They end up being very self critical about their appearance, and it's never enough. And if they don't work on that, they project it to their partners. Their partners become never enough, right? A healthy Venus in Virgo, though, is like the best friend, is like the best packer in a friend group, or really stable, reliable partner. Because if they're mature, they will see themselves and share with themselves really important things that, like, you might not see in yourself, but they don't just tell you, I hate that you do this. It's more like, have you noticed that you do this? And you're like, wow, I didn't even notice that. And then they give you the space to actually understand that about yourself versus, I think you should do this and this and this instead, right? A healthy Virgo Venus is not going to look for the perfect person because they don't exist, and also not try to create a perfect person. I noticed that Venus in Virgo and heavy Virgo placement ends up creating Frankensteins, where they take person and try to make them a project to fix. And it's like, just let the person be. Just let them be what they are. You know, you don't have to do that. So, with that being said, here is a picture of the aspects. And that's pretty much it for my presentation. I appreciate you guys for being so loving, caring, and also straightforward. This has been an hour. I'm going to stop the recording and then we're gonna go ahead and actually look through some of your charts. You guys have me for about like 30 more minutes, and you can ask me any question you want. If you want me to take a look at where Virgo is in your chart, and we can do that.